Okay, there we go. That's probably better, isn't it? That might be helpful. And then I just need to set up my camera capture. Video capture. Hello. Yes. Thank you. Let's see. Alright, well, I don't really care that much. Let's just actually go do something, huh? The thing is, I do though. So, the problem that I currently have is that I want to like cut off part of my webcam thing, but I've forgotten how any of this works. So that is a struggle. Yes. Crop, there we go. Not there. Something like that, probably, right? Also, please forgive my hair being absolutely horrendous on the back. It does that a lot. That's great. Strongly recommend having hair on the back of your head. This is why I go bald sometimes. Okay, well, that should be good. Merp. Yeah, that's... Okay. Let's actually open Unreal, considering that's what we're supposed to be doing. See, you say that, Mike, but vertical taskbar is actually really good for productivity. Because in Unreal, you tend to have this problem that, at least it was worse in UE4. It's less bad in UE5 because you have the expandable content browser and stuff. But in the past, you'd very quickly end up with like a very wide but not very tall viewport, which isn't representative and skews with perspective and stuff compared to what the game actually ends up looking like. So what I ended up doing is moving the taskbar to the side so that it doesn't... What did I just do? I broke the camera. But anyway, move the taskbar to the side so that it doesn't keep deciding to, you know, get in the way and squish the windows even further than they need to be squished. So I actually think that it is tremendously helpful to have the taskbar on the side. There we go. Camera's not dead anymore. How lovely. I mean, it will probably die at some point during the stream anyway, because that's what it does, but whee! No comments on camera deletion. I wonder if I can pop this somewhere. I guess I can't. Oh well, that's fine. So I don't actually really have a plan. I was working earlier. Let's collapse that. What? I wish that it didn't do that. It really annoys me that Unreal expands all of these on startup by default. Like, no, of course I don't want every single bloody actor to have its group expanded. I'm like stacking them in inheritance for a reason. But anyway, like, no, go away. Don't do that. So I'm working on my mountain brushes, which are a bit complex. And these are working with a height channel rather than a full surface. And I was trying to create a preview mesh because it's kind of annoying to not be able to click stuff. But that had the issue that it just kind of didn't work. So now I am a little bit unsure what to do on that front. So let's just try this. I don't love the new bounds workflow personally. It's a bit confusing. I'll probably get used to it, but it was kind of necessary, but it's not great. If people want music, let me know. That incredible amount of noise in the background is my dog. Okay, so what I have is a bunch of stuff here, and ideally I think we would do this, and then we make a height surface out of it and plug that in, and that's probably not going to do what I want at all. No, so I still Okay, so this is pretty similar to the issue I was experiencing before. And I feel, so in this graph, I have a whole bunch of query with position nodes, and I feel like those might be causing problems with, you know, the preview. The issue is that I can't really not use them because I need these brushes to be transformed. So that's upsetting. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to use a sphere for all of these so that they are at least selectable in some form. Do I have radius? Yes, radius. Okay, that's not necessarily super useful, but oh boy, yeah. Make capsule? Crap. How about that? That is reasonably okay, except that they're ridiculously tall, which means I can't actually do anything. Yeah, this is tricky. So what I'm doing, because I want to be able to use all the editor controls for this, so I have these things scaled quite significantly, but that means that the spheres are stupidly tall because they are transformed accordingly. So that's unfortunate. But I guess we're just going to ignore that. At least I can select them now. So, we have a mountain brush, and I think this is pretty neat, because I can just like duplicate them. By default, they're sort of like deterministic. So they don't change as I move them around. So this one is, hello? Is it not anymore? I guess I changed things so that it's not anymore. That's a little bit upsetting, actually. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Go away. Oh, well, that's surprising, actually. But it looks the same here. I guess it's just related to the terrain it's blending into then. That's fine. Anyway, they're deterministic, so I have to like randomize the seed to do something else with them. But then from here I can just like use the z-scale to increase that, and they don't have to be actually square, like circular. And I can just rotate them however I want, and then they do the thing. And they can also, which I think is the most fun, be subtractive. Let's make sure that it's actually applied last. That does help sometimes. This produces interesting effects here. I've never actually tried that, like intersecting with another brush like that. It's not too surprising that it does that, because it's interpolating between the original terrain that was there and whatever it gets. So here it gets something kind of weird because the two noises are cancelling each other. So that's interesting. But I mean, it works, which is pretty cool. So if we put that there. I'm not happy with how quickly this is generating, but I'm not really sure why that is as bad as it is. But I can just do that, which should help matters a little bit. We do have grass generating on this, in theory. And then up here, the grass is happily recolored, because the grass comes from sort of the previous iteration of this project. So it has this lovely little color gradient as it goes up. But that previous iteration was using just like a completely custom material, whereas now I'm using something based on the material sample, which means that this doesn't actually work anymore. Like I can't just, so what I used to do is I had just a color multiplier that changed as the height changed. I can't do that anymore reasonably. So now I'm thinking that I'll need to make a separate material definition, which is the exact same thing, except with a different colored grass. So let's try that. And then we don't actually need that one. We just need this one. And then we can do a blend and make surface material. Get position 3D. I don't know. Let's just do that for starters, and then we'll see what that does. I mean, that worked, I guess. Let's go have a look at the grass material to see what I actually do for that. Is the stream actually working properly? Because, like, I don't have it open and I don't see anyone talking, so now I'm a little bit concerned. YouTube. Yes, good. It is working. We go to the grass material. So the browning height is 44,000 units. So in here, let's do 44, but I suspect that's not going to be it, because I probably have an offset in there somewhere as well. Okay, cool. Yep, that's good then. Thanks, guys. So this material I do not recommend looking at for more than like 15 seconds. Okay, so 40,000 is the division, and I'm offsetting it by 44,000. Am I doing this properly? That does not look like a 400-meter transition. I think there's no way that's 400 meters, is there? Alt H. Yeah, it's very drunk. Yeah, that's really not doing what I'd want it to do. I wonder if it's because I'm height blending. Because I'm height... yeah. Crap. So this isn't actually easy to work around, which is really frustrating. So what's happening is both of these textures have the same height map at like the exact same position, and the height blend logic isn't symmetrical. So like if both are 1, it's always going to skew to one side rather than slowly blending them. So it's basically just going to increase the blend contrast, which means that the blend area isn't actually going to be these 800 meters that I say here. It's going to be way less than that. So I'll have to screw with it to like try and bring it back. But that is really annoying because it means I'm going to have a way harder time synchronizing that logic with whatever I'm doing in the actual grass material. What? Why did it just invert? That's not expected behavior. Oh, I guess I had negative values in there. That's fun, I hadn't considered that. Well, yeah, I mean, as much as it sucks, a lot of the iterative process is just like putting something somewhere and praying it works. I would like it to not be like that, but it is. That makes sense. Okay. I think we're getting somewhere, finally. Problem now is that obviously this like doesn't even come close to matching the grass. And I don't really know how I'm going to solve that, which is upsetting. Well, that's not quite right, is it? Is the grass continually getting brighter as we go up the mountainside? That might be. I may or may not have not accounted for that. No, I am doing a saturate on there. Okay, so it's not. So I need to match it to whatever this is. So this is, once again, the scientific process of trying to make things work. Yeah, something like that. And now we gotta pray that like sort of halfway lines up with the gradient, which it definitely doesn't. This also feels really overexposed. Oh, interesting. We've actually made the like terrain gradient too gentle now. Yeah, that's unfortunate. No, like that. That feels like it's pretty close. Oh, never mind. It's not. I hate this. This is the upsetting part of this process. I think that I'm going to go ahead and call this good enough. Assuming it matches down here as well. Which it should, like, yeah. Cool, I'm happy with that. Cool day. Excuse? Hello, sir? There we go. That's interesting. Oh, I guess we're creating really bad distance errors here. That's not actually that strange. This is a pretty steep cliff. Let's put pebbles in. See how that goes? Not. Excellent. Just the way I like it. Does this make sense? Yeah, right. There seems to be a problem with the gradient thing, which is unfortunate. But basically, everything's going wrong with the normals. So if I set max steps to anything, it's just going to go, haha, no, go on. Because the slope check just always fails everything. Which is very strange, but not something I can really do anything with at this particular point in time. So hey ho. This feels like not how I set this up, does it? Yeah. Do I not have a dither on there? I guess I don't. Do I really not? But I do. Why is that not working then? Yeah, that's way better. Although, lots of artifacts, but we'll see whether we can fix that. As it stands, this just like completely doesn't match the terrain, which makes a lot of sense. And this is actually tricky. We now run into something that I haven't actually thought about yet. So previously, I had all of these things just like matching the terrain perfectly. And now that gets tricky because I don't actually have all the relevant information in this graph. What I mean by that is because everything is now going through the material definition system, it's going through like fancy voxel functions, which means I can't easily just like reuse a terrain material function, I think. I mean, I can try, but I have some doubts. I beg to differ, and I definitely think there is a try. Let's see. Yeah, that's the expected result, sadly. So this, I am fairly sure, is default texture green, which yeah, is upsetting. So what that means is that I can't use any of the voxel terrain material stuff directly on another asset, which like isn't that weird, but it's upsetting because it means that I have to go and manually match all the colors rather than just like sampling the same texture as the object is on in the first place and then it being happy. So yay. I wish we could just like do some sort of cheeky surface cache type thing where we just have a low resolution texture cache of everything which we can then sample in other objects. I'm trying to push Phi to that, but we're not there yet. Well, maybe I can just start with making this a flat collar, because well, this is more or less a flat color, really. Oh, but that's not true, because actually there's lots of color variation going on in there already. But it might be good enough to be hidden. Oh, this looks gross. I hate that with a passion. That might actually be worse than not having them. Oh. Oh. Okay. No rocks for me right now. Next horrible plan. No, let's not save that. Yes, they're supposed to be rocks. But I don't blame you for the confusion at all. Yeah, cool. Oh, right, but displacement doesn't work, so I can't do this either. This is quite upsetting. What I was going to do is just like try and I was going to try to just do this with displacement, so I at least have some surface detail, but that's not going to happen. Which is unfortunate. No, not subsurface color. What position? Offset. Merp. Oh, go away. Oh, it's working. That's good to know. Okay, let's actually fix this then. Something like 1,000? Probably more even. Lots of tiny crackles. So, no. This is an unfortunate side effect of the way that detail textures work. And it's a little bit tricky. I thought that we had solved that, though. So it's sad to see that we haven't. But that's fine. I want the surface thickness, because that is the mask for whether something's a cliff or not. Except clearly the inverse of it, because right now I'm just doing this on the grassy areas, which is not quite what I had in mind. Merp. Okay, perfection. I see no issues with this whatsoever. No issues whatsoever. Reopen that, and then for a laugh, we're just going to go... No, I don't actually want to write any of those. 225. Yeah, perfection. If anybody has any issues with this, that's very much a you problem. This is totally shippable without any issues whatsoever. Okay, that does help quite a lot, doesn't it? Just make it push out less towards the positive and more towards the negative. That does look a lot better, wow. I wonder how that compares to the collision. Yeah, not too far off. And if we go back to voxel size of 100, yeah, that's definitely worse. Yeah. I think we can get away with that, like 50. Okay. And then we're going to fancify this a little. What this is going to do is it's going to make this go diagonal a little bit, which is very good because that'll make it a little bit less boring, a little bit less predictable. This should be too much by quite a bit. 4,000, so that's a 4:1 ratio, so that's a 20% slope. Yeah, that's more like it. Probably want to go even less. Yes, I want to go even less. Excuse me. Okay, so that's that. And then we want to like wobble it based on the XY position. So that's just a top-down XY texture sample. So I'm gonna, don't like how much noise my computer is making. And then we just use whatever noise. That one's good. Okay. I think we want a different texture. Something a bit more high frequency. I can really strongly recommend just like having a whole bunch of noise like this in your projects, by the way, because it really helps in iterating this sort of stuff. It's incredible how much difference like noise profiles make, as you can see. So now we can go way bigger, and the perk of this, like, we don't actually need a lot of resolution. We just, like, this can be super blurry because it's not going to be visible directly. It's just used as a shift, so interpolation is fine. We won't see the cubicness of that. And because this is a way more high frequency texture, we get way more, we won't have any tiling in the noise. So now we have way more uniqueness going on, which should be helpful. Excuse my pets having the time of their life in the back. Let's just replace that with a nice clean number. 120,000. So it's now tiling over a kilometer. Is it really though? It doesn't feel like a kilometer. Well, we'll see. Should be fine. Will the video be available later? I think this stream will stay up. I'm not 100% sure, but I think this will be a VOD and just like rewatchable and skimmable. So my actual problem is that my strata texture is way too repetitive. So I wonder if I can replace that. Because in theory, I can just like use whatever noise. Would we use the same noise? That might just work. Because we're only like using one axis of it. Like, if you look at the coordinates, one of them is just 0, so we're only sampling like one vertical line of pixels, so it doesn't actually matter that this is like full-on noise and not just horizontal lines, because it's going to be effectively the same in the end. So if we just do that, and then I'm going to make this really big because I just want to ignore it for a second. This is going to be rubbish, but then we can start. What? Okay, let's not do that for a second, because that's wild. There we go, that's more like it. Look at how much less repetitive that is. I am very sorry if anybody has issues, like epilepsy. Sorry, words abandoned me for a second. But yeah, this is way better for the strata. Willow. Cat casually climbing in the curtains, as you do. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So that's 40,000. And then we're going to do the horizontalness again. And we're going to want that to be like a bunch higher than this. So actually we're just going to do that, because we want that one to be a ratio of this one. And that doesn't have the expected effect at all, which is actually strange to me. That's fun. So I'm appending it, and then I'm adding, and this is a float, and this is at this point a float too, which means it's adding it to both channels. So that was, you don't want to do that. You want to do that add first, and then append the 0. What am I doing? Sorry, what? I'm confused. Okay. Add that and that, append that, and See, I made logical errors which just weren't apparent until now. Because I had the same, like we had a texture that was the same for every U component of the UVs. But now it's doing problematic things. Anyway, there we go. Now we have a lovely little world tilt. I actually feel like this is way too much. I feel like it should be way subtler. So we're going to do that like 12, so it's ever so slightly tilted. It's really interesting how quickly this makes you feel like the entire world is askew and your camera is tilted, so that is something to be mindful of. And we're going to want to like remove this diffuse effect on the grass actually, because it looks questionable, as you can tell. But that's fine. First, we're going to continue doing the wobble. So we're going to go nice and up close. And then we're going to reinstate this add here. Oh, come on, that one. And then we'll see what happens. Now this is going to be way too intense. Yeah. We're going to need that to be at like a way smaller value now, because our texture is way bigger. And this is like in UV space, so we're now offsetting 0.3% of the UV, which is good. What's interesting here is that this is very much increasing the amount of artifacting that we see with the vertex edges, but we're just going to ignore that because there's nothing I can do about that right now. And then we're just going to sit here and have a look at how stuff is. It does look good. I like what this does with the terrain. Now, ideally, I think we want to change this frequency. Or do we? I don't actually know. We'll do something like that. And then lower it? No, we should just make this way, like lower frequency. Lower frequency, not higher frequency. If we go to 0. The artifacts are upsetting me a little bit. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that. We just need to like modulate what this is going to do on the diffuse, because right now that's way too strong. But we're also going to have to modulate what this is doing for the not diffuse. So let's just like stretch all of this out a little bit. And actually we're going to make this like a separate set so that we can move it separately from all of the other stuff in front there. We can remove that one. Cool. So we have this. Which is good. That goes there. Merp. This should probably be 0.5 again based on this texture. Although we'll see if that's actually true. Okay. So we have the surface thickness here, which we're using over here, but we also need to use that. Over here. And because this is 0 when it's a top surface, 1 when it's a cliff. No, 1 when it's a top surface, 0 when it's a cliff. This is always going to be higher than this when it's like not a cliff. So in theory, this should get rid of it on the grass. Like so. That's very good. Now the question is whether we actually want to get rid of all of it on the grass, because this does kind of make the grass look weird. Like that little bit of striation did ground the grass more. Okay. Probably got that the wrong way around. Yeah, got that the wrong way around. Hey, Hollow Moon Lantern. So the reason I adjust these nodes so quickly is because I've been doing it for 8 years at this point. I've been using Unreal Engine for 8 years. And from the get-go, when I got into it, I was mostly working with materials and stuff, and then a bit of scripting on the side. My background, I came from Unity at the time. I started Unity like 10 years ago, did a bunch of C# and that sort of thing, tech-arty stuff, worked a lot on visuals and just making things pretty. Because like the goal was, let's make a game, but in reality I cared a lot more about making things pretty than actually making a game. So I ended up just playing with, well, not materials and stuff yet, but post-processing, lighting, and that sort of thing. And then when I moved to Unreal, that quickly moved to materials. But I did also have some programming experience. So the value in having a bit of programming experience in this sort of thing is that it's the same kind of thinking. So there's the normal way in which we think as people, and then there's the way that computers operate, which is very different, because when you say to a human, like, I want to do thing X, they will just understand. It's like natural language. It's what we have with all the AIs, and why the AIs are so valuable. We can just say what we want and they'll do it. Computers don't work that way. So like, pour me a cup of coffee isn't a good instruction. You have to say, grab the coffee grinder, put the beans in the grinder, put the grinder, like, not even put the coffee in, or the grinds in the cup or whatever. You can't do that. You have to be specific that you have to actually grind first, because otherwise it's just going to put the beans back in that cup without grinding them. So like, you have to be explicit about every step, and that's why programming is valuable, because it teaches you that kind of thinking. That said, you can learn that kind of thinking from materials as well. So you don't need programming experience to get into materials and stuff. It's just you'll find more resources on solving programming problems, and if you learn to solve programming problems, you will also learn to solve material problems. That said, in the end, a lot of this boils down to just knowing what functions you have available to you and stepping through math. And then as you do that lots and lots and lots, starting to build an intuition for the math. So in a case like this, I mean, lerping is your best friend, but this is what the reason I can do this quickly is numbers, intuition. You just like do things a lot and you start intuitively knowing which stuff you want where. But if we just look at something like this, so if we just isolate this little bit, this is our strata logic. and we can get rid of that add. So we have a texture, and if we just like zoom in all the way and we act like we have one of these vertical lines, this gives us a strata texture, because it's just like different for every vertical layer. So that's what we want. So when it comes to UVs, we don't care about the U, we only care about the V. You could also swap these, doesn't actually matter, as long as like you're using the Z component of world position somewhere. So we want to use the world position Z as UV component because we're working with just like the position in the world. So that's relatively straightforward. Normally this is 1 centimeter, which means every centimeter this texture would repeat, which we don't want, that's way too often. So instead we're dividing it by 40,000, which is 400 meters, because 400,000 centimeters is 400 meters. So now it'll tile vertically every 400 meters. Then, you know, in theory, we can just do that and we'd have a strata texture. Now this isn't going to do too much. Oh yeah, it's decently visible. So now we have a strata texture. And then we go, oh, but we want it to be slightly tilted. What information do we have available? We have world position available, and wanting things to be diagonal means that you don't just want it to change based on the Z position, you want it to change based on XY position as well, because as I'm getting further that way, the thing needs to go up a little bit. So rather than like using this as a separate component somewhere, we're just going to add it to the Z. But we want to make sure that the slope isn't too steep. So we have to divide that by something that is higher than what we divided the Z component by. The ratio of those two is going to decide how slopey it is. Like if we have this set to 0.1, so if we divide this by 10 and we divide this by 1,000, then it's going to be really close to going straight up with those lines. Whereas if we swap that, it's going to be really close to going completely straight. And the closer we bring those ratios together, the closer it's going to get to 45 degrees. So it's all just math, and you need to just step through it. And the same goes for voxel graphs, for what it's worth. Like if you look at this sort of thing, I mean, this is not a good example because this is complicated, but there is, let's see if this other graph that I have in this project still works. Because I have no idea if it still does. No, I didn't actually want you to save. That one wanted to save. Well, that seems not functioning. Oh, no, there we go. Okay. So, in this thingy, I need to actually check what we're outputting here. So we're setting highs and we're setting that here. Okay, so we have a radial cliffs function. And this is like a really nice example of like using numbers to do cool stuff. Because actually all of this makes quite a lot of sense in individual steps, but you really need to make it into tiny steps. And the more you break those things into tiny steps, the more you're going to be able to see like, I'm trying to solve this big problem. And in order to solve that big problem, I'm going to have to do all these tiny steps. And that's just like a case of doing it a lot. But if we look over here, my goal with this was I want, well, this, you know, I want to have radial cells and I want to be able to like have some of them be terraced and some of them just flat. So what we do is the starting point is world position, like the farther we get from origin. So if you generate a circle, you want to just get the length from the world position, and that'll give you this kind of gradient from origin. Then subtracting, so if we look at these values, we're going to subtract from that. And the reason that's important, come on. Hello? I think I am being silly, but I don't quite remember. Right. So the issue here, so we're subtracting 10,000, which is we're subtracting 100 meters. Because this is like how far are we from origin. And then this, look at the min value here, that's changing by more or less 10,000. This is, okay, we want to like subtract 10,000, so 100 meters from the origin. And that's what gives us this center area, which is just flat, as you can see. Miren. Back. Nee. Back. Dog has decided that it's barky time. Hey. Good girl. Then, problem here. Mare. Shush. Problem here is that this is now negative, which we don't want, because that screws math up. So we're just going to max it with 0. And now, like, we're not going to have negative values anymore, because if anything's below 0, it's going to just get set to 0. Then we divide by whatever our terraces, how big we want our terraces to be. In this case, we want that to be 100 meters. So we're dividing by 10,000, which is 100 meters in centimeters. And then there's this fun node, which gets us the fractional value. So if we have 1.1, it's going to give us 0.1. If we have 2.6, it's going to give us 0.6. So if we visualize that, you can see that we get this, where we just have this like forever expanding band from the origin. That's neat because this is essentially a terrace, if you think about it. Like if you imagine this as height, starts at 0, then it's going to go up, and then it's going to go right back down to 0. And it's going to go up and right back down to 0. Problem is, we want that to be the other way around, because we want like stuff going towards the origin, not away from the origin. So we need to 1 minus x that, because at this point, this is 0 to 1, because we've just divided it and gotten a fraction, and the fraction is going to be 0 to 1. So 1 minus x works. If you're working with values that are more than 0 to 1, 1 minus x doesn't work. This is like one of those common number intuition thingies that people get really confused about. Because like, you see people use 1 minus x to invert something. People tell you, you want to invert something, use 1 minus x. But that's not always the case. Because if you have a value of 0 and you do 1 minus 0, it's going to return 1. If you have a value of 1 and you do 1 minus 1, it's going to return 0. So that's a perfect inversion. 0.4 is going to give you 0.6, 0.7 is going to give you 0.3. That works. But now imagine you have a value of 1.3. 1 minus 1.3 gives you minus 0.7. Is that correct? No, it's going to give you minus 0.3, which is like not a useful value. That's not at all what you're expecting. The inverse of 1.3 is not minus 0.3. The probable inverse that you want in most use cases then is minus 1.3. So then you want to do times minus 1. If you do want to use 1 minus x, so you can actually like flip it around as a 0 to 1 range, you need your values to be in 0 to 1 first. So you need to do a fraction, or you need to clamp it so that it doesn't go under and above 0 and 1, something like that. But you can't just do a 1 minus x and expect it to work, because the numbers don't work that way. So when in doubt about why something doesn't work when you're trying to do something like this, do the math. Just like grab some theoretical values and do the math. Voxel graphs help with this a lot because you have this preview. Now, it's a little bit misleading sometimes because by default this is normalized. So like we can zoom, which looks like nothing's changing, but if we look at the min and max value, like that's changing dramatically. It's just normalizing it, so that's not helpful. But if you like click somewhere, you can see the value. So right now we're looking at a scale of 5 meters. And if we click more or less at the center, we can see that we're 4 centimeters away. And if we click here, we can see that we're more or less 4 meters away. Now, if we go over here, back to the fractions, and we zoom out a little bit farther, because again, we're dividing by 100, so now we need to be zoomed out more, you can now see, okay, so at the start, close to my origin, I'm at 0, and then as I go up, it's increasing, because again, you can see the value right there, and then once we reach 1, it resets back down to 0. That's the opposite of what we want, so we want minus x, and now we have this, where we start at 1, and then as you go farther away, it goes back down to 0, and then it goes back up to 1. And having this available so you can just click through at every step of the math is super helpful, because instead of having to do this math yourself on paper or in Notepad or on a calculator or something, you can just click through and you can see what the math is doing, and it will help you build that intuition as to what numbers you want to use when and why things are behaving the way they are. The thing is, the really big important thing is, if you just look at this and then you look at this, it doesn't make sense how you get from A to B. And that is the big problem in the end. You need to break the problem down into smaller and smaller issues. You need to understand what variables you have and how you can abuse them to get the result that you want. And this will help you with that, because it will, help you understand why numbers are doing what they're doing. You can step through every individual step, but it's not enough by itself. The way you have to develop this is by just playing around and fiddling and trying to get stuff. And initially you'll struggle and your results will suck. And then as you go, you're going to build that intuition, and it's going to get better and better and better. And in the end, you'll just do things. The first time that you just actually go, oh, I want to do this thing, and then you just place the nodes and it works, is really great. And that's only going to get more common as you do it more. That said, I make mistakes in this sort of stuff all the time. I also have a graphing calculator just laying on my desk next to me, because I actually need a graphing calculator sometimes. When you're doing complicated math, things can get really confusing, and having a proper way to sanity check the numbers is really useful. And obviously you can enter your graphs and stuff and just basic calculations on Google or some online calculator or number software. You can do that. I personally am way quicker on a graphing calculator than I am even with my numpad. So I prefer just having a calculator on hand for it. But I do realize that this is a little bit biased from the perspective that I literally do this for a living. So I spend all my time looking at numbers like this. Anyway, this has been a super long and rambly answer to what seemed like a simple question. So I hope that's actually been useful. I hope that you're even still here, that you haven't just left. But hey, I hope it's useful to someone. And the best advice that I have is just get started. Find something that you're passionate about, that you're interested in exploring, and just keep trying until it gets better and better and better. And don't be afraid to just try stuff and do things wrong. And don't be afraid to ask people for their opinions. Don't get stuck trying to do things by yourself. Just ask people for help. I don't know how it is nowadays. I don't hang around there anymore. But the Unreal Slacker server has been absolutely crucial for my development as a technical artist. Because it was just a place where I went to sanity check my logic. And nowadays, I don't need that often anymore. And then it also used to not be able to do my job without Google. I used to need to Google everything. Whereas nowadays, I can just sit at my computer doing this kind of work literally all day without ever needing to open a browser for it. But that comes from just having done way too much. Unreal Source now, you are correct, Tommy. Yeah, so it's called Unreal Source now, but it's a little bit harder to find on Google, but you can still get there, and it's just a very good place where you can ask people what they think of what you're doing, and that goes for materials and it goes for voxel graphs. So the reason I jumped to voxel graphs for this isn't because I necessarily want people to use Voxel Plugin or I see this as a Voxel plugin problem. It's just that the way you have to think about numbers in voxel graphs and materials is almost exactly the same. And the preview in voxel graphs is so much better than in materials. Like, if we go over here and I preview this, like, one, this isn't useful because it's in world space, so I can't actually see what it's doing properly. I can't like make the sphere bigger or something. And two, I don't know like what the min and max values I have on screen right now are. I can't just like click somewhere to see what the value is. So if I'm actually trying to do math, so say I'm trying to remap to, I'm trying to make sure that this texture is -1 to 1 in terms of values, I have to just like go neurotically check and do a whole bunch of extra math and maybe check the texture in Photoshop to make sure that the lowest values are 0 and the highest are 1, and then do my math based on that in the material. So it's a pain. Whereas in voxel graphs, you can just click and you will know the value, and that does save a lot of hassle. Doesn't work across the board. There are contexts in which this doesn't work with voxel graphs still, like if you're relying on brushes and stuff and channel queries, this does fall apart. But at least for getting that math intuition, this can really help a lot. For just sanity checking the things you're thinking. Generally speaking, I think the preview has very few bugs as well. Like sometimes there's rendering artifacts and stuff in the generate marching cubes thing, but they don't usually show up in the preview, which is helpful. Anyway, I've just continued to ramble even more. I forgot where my level is. So, we were doing strata. Oh man, all the fucking seams. It really is quite terrible. That is unfortunate. Anyway, we're just going to ignore them because, well, not really much of an alternative. Okay, so we've gotten rid of it on the grass. But we don't actually want to entirely get rid of it on the grass. So this is another one. In this case, like this texture is too dark here. So I want to, so it's 0 to 1. I don't want the zeros because I don't want to multiply it by 0 because that makes my diffuse just black, which is depressing. So what I want to do is I want to make this like 0.5 to 1. We know that this texture is 0 to 1, more or less. Might not be exact, but close enough. We don't need exact math here, it's just about visuals. So, what I can do is I can just take this channel, plug it into the alpha of a lerp, and set this to 0.5 and 1. Because, like, if it's 0, it's going to use 0.5. If it's 1, it's going to be 1. Ta-da! So now, if we just do this, we're going to have way less darkness in the diffuse overlay on the terrain. And then we can just fiddle with this a bit. sRGB is weird. So like humans don't perceive brightness linearly, so the actual like middle gray point is at 0.23 or something, I forget. But yeah, like you want to do this visually, and 50% intensity towards black from white is around the 0.2, 0.3 mark. So something like this is usually more sensible. And then we can do a little bit of this on grass still. So what we can do is, rather than having this be a 1, because right now we're like doing a multiply, so when we have something, when an area is cliff, it's getting this, and when an area isn't cliff, it's just getting 1, and that's then getting multiplied. So that's not helpful. Because it means we don't have any of our lines on grass, and we want a little bit of our lines on grass. So again, we're just going to do this same thing, grab a lerp, plug the texture into the alpha, but then we're just going to use like 0.6 instead. And now we will have a little bit of lines on the grass, but nowhere near as intense. So if we like really zoom in, you can see that we do have the lines continuing on the grass now. And in some places that does help quite a bit with just increasing the sharpness of the visual. It's like if we go to a spot like this, it doesn't really make that much of a difference once you're up close, but it does very much help the vistas. And yes, Mike, I have turned on the transitions in the chunk spawner. The seams that you're seeing here are not chunk seams, like you can see that they are everywhere. These are caused by displacement, because the terrain generator has individual, like every face, every triangle has fully unique vertices. It's not a connected mesh, so that means that when you push one vertex, like when you push along the vertex normal on a connected mesh, it will like go like this. But in this case, they're not connected, so this one face can just like be pushed like this, and then the one that's in the same spot but to the left can be pushed like that, and then you end up with that, so you have a little seam between the faces. And that's what's happening here, and I thought we now accounted for that, but I guess we don't yet, so that's upsetting. I'm going to be right back. I'm just going to fill this bottle, and then I shall be back. I have returned. I'm just going to actually check the Discord to see what's happening, if anything's happening. Okay, let's quickly have a look at something, and then we can almost continue. I don't know, does anybody have anything that they'd like for me to have a look at or fiddle with? I don't really have any particular goal in mind right now, but if anybody has anything that they'd like me to talk about or show or play with, I can do that. If not, I'll just find something to play around with. Like, I will be absolutely fine either way. But thought I would give you guys the opportunity to Voice your preferences. No, wait, that's not what I meant to do. Oh. Top tip, don't organize your graphs this way, or like leave them unorganized this way. More like yeah. So what's unfortunate about this now is that my grass doesn't match anymore because the brightness is radically different. So now I'm going to have to copy this logic to the grass, which shouldn't actually be that tricky. So we just take this one. And that should be all we need. Biomes are sort of a thing. So we don't like have a biome structure within the plugin, a set way for you to do it. But with how the surface system, the definition, material definition framework works now, you can have an effectively infinite amount of terrain layers. And you can just switch foliage based on different areas. Like you can have channels as masks configured and stuff. You can just remove foliage from areas that you don't want it in. So like we don't have biome structures in place, and it won't necessarily be the most optimized because of that. But you can totally already do things. So you can have like different foliage spawn in different areas based on whatever arbitrary masks you want to define. The only thing that's like really difficult to do with biomes right now is to actually generate the biome data, as in like this place has this biome and this place has this other biome, and then for the 100 meters in between we're transitioning from one to the other, because we don't support texture samples, which is a little bit unfortunate and makes things more difficult. Oh, this is fun. I hadn't realized that. Huh. Only to fix that. Fun. So, in the complex material, there's the blend weights thing, which you can use to determine whether something's a cliff or not. But when you are using bottom textures, it like sees the bottom as not cliff, which I mean makes sense from a math perspective, because like the top and the bottom are the same thing, and then the sides are the same thing. But really this one belongs to the sides now, and then only the top should be different. So that's just fun little caveats. So I'll need to have a look at that at some point, see if I can fix that. But I'm also not sure if I actually want to, because that does mess with some logic. Wow, this graph is a mess. Oh, I had not realized that. Okay, let's copy paste that there. Please do not use this graph as an example. It would make me very upset if you did that. Merp. If I collapse it into a function, it will look clean, yes. The problem is that it still won't be clean. That said, the like named reroutes, so over the last year and a half, I haven't worked with materials a whole lot. So I never really got into the habit of using named reroute declarations. But they are tremendous for this sort of thing. Like, this would be a mess. I'd have to reorganize my entire graph for this, but instead I can just like make it like this and have my little strata reroute node thingy there, and then boop. Oh, there it is. Excellent. Compartmentalized logic. I hate working with material functions for compartmentalization because it's so hard to like untangle things. Because you have to keep working and fiddling with inputs and outputs when you're like trying to debug something and stuff. So it's just a pain. I don't like material functions. I also basically don't use macros in voxel graphs, kind of for the same sets of reasons. It's just not something that comes very naturally to me. Even though I know I probably should at this point. This is pretty neat. I'm kind of happy with this. That's fun. Interesting. I hadn't realized that my post-process settings were different for that. Oh, go away. I was kind of hoping when I was complaining about like this stuff starting collapsed at the start of the stream that somebody in chat would just go like, oh yeah, you can like disable that by doing this, but that has not happened. Yeah, having macros for stuff you do often in voxel graphs makes a lot of sense. I guess it could make sense for the brush previews, but it's not. I think part of my problem is that living on dev, things just break so often that your macros aren't really worth anything. I don't actually know what EQS queries are, or like I think I know, but I have to check. Right. So I can't say I'm certain. We haven't tested it. But from a functional perspective, like we don't do anything particularly special for the navmesh stuff. We just like give Unreal Engine the navmesh data it cares about, and then it gets passed into the nav system. So assuming that the EQS queries just go through the actual navmesh framework through recast rather than through some lower level layer, I would expect things to just work. But I can't be sure, sadly. Lumen does have drawbacks. You lose a lot of that nice little definition from normals and stuff because it kills the screen space ambient occlusion. You can get that back, mind you. I don't know if you don't know this, but what is it? These two. If you set short range AO to 0 and then the SSAO to 1, you will get your screen space ambient occlusion pass back. And this is just the regular screen space occlusion. So I can like just play with the intensity like usual, and that will work. But this like gives you a bunch of artistic control back that you otherwise lose with Lumen, while keeping all the lovely global illumination. Anyway, I was actually going to do exposure. Yeah, so the EV goes where it should. It's just too sensitive to the highs, I think. Yeah, let's not do that. That's kind of terrible. That's good. And this needs to be less. Can you just like crank these for a second so I have instant responses? Thanks. Okay. What? 10 is the default for that? Really? Interesting. Well, that might be fine then. Yeah, that looks pretty reasonable. We can disable that stuff again. I do wish that we had some sort of erosion. It would be quite helpful. Yeah, I might do a second layer of this. Have you tried doing splines, Mike? Because I feel like they should work. Like, just a blueprint with which spawns a bunch of stuff along a spline. I should probably increase the distance checks a little bit on this. Oh, we're not even generating distance fields. That's upsetting. Sad lumen noises. Excuse? Hello? I didn't disable lumen. Huh. Huh. Or am I just too far? Oh, I'm just too far. That makes sense. Yeah, Lumen doesn't want to do things too far away. I actually spent some time on that with Phi to figure out how that whether we could hack that, but it's not really a path we can go down. Like, we can hack it, sort of, but it has implications and isn't reliable. So sadly we can't just do that. Right, so I was actually doing distance checks. Can we just set that to 10 and see if that... I wonder if that's a bounds issue, actually. It probably is. Let's yeah, okay, that is questionable then. I do feel like there's issues with the draw debug bounds. Like, this can't be all. Like, is it... I'm just seeing one debug line. And bounds are not one debug line. Maybe it just has a really screwed up bounds. Oh. It does have really screwed up bounds. Okay. Have a good night, Mike. And good luck, have fun watching the rest back. There's probably not going to be too much more, admittedly. Okay. Sir, I need you to come with me. So, okay, there are bounds. Let's follow this line. Okay, let's see how far down this goes. Yeah, you'd think that if those are the bounds, we wouldn't be running into any issues. Yet we are. Yeah, I don't understand why this is happening. It's fine now. So it doesn't seem likely that it's a bounds issue then. But I don't understand why it wasn't behaving before. Very strange. I am gonna call it a day, I think, because I need to actually be up at a decent time tomorrow, and I still need to do some stuff. But I do really like what these brushes do. I know what's actually cool with this. I hadn't even considered this, but I think you can like make a canyon like this. Except not really, because like it has too much fall off. Okay, what if we make them shorter? See, now we're just doing splines, except very manual. That is pretty cool though. See, there's another way of doing this, which in a context like this could end up working better. Because right now I'm like calculating heights immediately and writing that into a channel, and then the next brush takes those heights and like writes onto them. But what you could do is like write a canyon weight instead. And then you could grab that canyon weight in the end and calculate the heights from that. And if you did that, you'd be able to like use exponents and stuff to create less of a fall off in the transition area, so like less of these humps in the middle and only really towards the edges, because you can do like more clever math on that then, which you can't do anymore once you've converted it to heights, because once you've converted it to heights you have all these offsets everywhere and it doesn't really work anymore. Food for thought. Yeah, so I was saying that I'm going to go, and I am actually going to go now, because I have to wrap some things up. So it has been a joy, guys. Thank you for joining me, and well, I mean, if you have any further questions, you know where to find me. And otherwise, have a lovely rest of your day, evening, night, afternoon, morning, whatever. And hopefully see you again next time. Cheers, guys. And now I need to find the stop streaming button. Found it.